here. I'm here with a top 10 for you. I'm hopefully going to do a lot of these top 10s. While these are not necessarily tags, mostly because I'm only new, so I don't have that many people watching my videos and I don't know how to tag people yet. If you want to give them a go, I'd love to see them. And if you do, please let me know and link me to your videos. Anyway, this time it was the top 10 books that changed the way I read. While these aren't necessarily my favourite books, some of them definitely still are. So I'll be going in order from oldest to newest, not of publication date, but of date I read the book. Okay, so the first book we've got is A World of Winnie the Pooh by A.A. Milne and E.H. Shepard. It's massive, but this was the first for me. It was the first book that I read that wasn't, you know, A Very Hungry Caterpillar or one of those really nice children's picture books. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's still lots of lovely pictures in here, like this. But this one, it's got a lot more text in it. This one was the one Dad used to read to me. And I've still got it, same copy and everything. This book is what probably inspired my love of reading. Yay! Okay, so the second book is Fantastic Mr. Fox by Roald Dahl. Yeah, I was always going to have some sort of Roald Dahl book. I've chosen this one. It's not my original copy. My original copy fell to pieces. It was either going to be this one or George's Marvelous Medicine. I got them both at the same time. But this one I must have read 100,000 times. I love it. Didn't end up seeing the movie. It just looked awful. If you've seen the movie and it was okay, let me know. This book was one of the first novels, if you can call it that I read. I mean, sure, it's still pictures, and if I was to read it today, it would probably take me half an hour, if that. It's not very long. It was the first novel-ish book that I read, and all by myself. And it's amazing. Okay, so the third book on this top 10 is The Sisters Grimm, The Fairy Tale Detectives by Michael Buckley. How pretty is the cover? Which is the reason, well, one of the reasons that I first picked this book up. This book was the first ever fairy tale-esque book that I read. Meaning, no, sure, I've read Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and all of them before this. But this was the first time that I read a book based on fairy tales, and that is a style of book that I'm still very much reading today. I've yet to actually finish this series. I only just bought the last few and they're sitting on my shelf waiting for me to read, so I'll probably get around to those this year. I just love the premise, and I think a lot of other books and TV shows I think have had this idea recently, but that's okay because this was my first and it's just so pretty. The next book on this list, number 4, is none other than the Harry Potter series. Yeah, if anyone else does this list, which I hope they do because I'm really interested, I'm pretty sure this will turn up on pretty much every single list. For me, this was the first proper novel that I can remember reading that has absolutely no pictures. I started reading it when I was about 10 or so, and it's the longest running series that I've been reading. It's the series I've read for the longest because the last book didn't come out all that long ago. And it's, despite the fact that it's a kid's book, it's one that I still read today. And I know I'm not the only one to be doing that. It's Harry Potter. We're now finally moving into the more adult, young adult style books. Because the first 4 were all kiddie books, but then again, that's where I feel that your reading is really pushed and developed. First up, we've got The Boys Next Door by Jennifer Eccles. I don't know how many people know of this book, but this was the first ever romance that I read. I love it. I remember walking down this ramp at the library into the young adult section and feeling so cool because I was no longer reading from the kiddie section. This was the first book I picked out. It's part of the Simon Pulse Romantic Comedies collection. Probably talked about them before. I absolutely adore these books. probably at least partly because they were the first romances that I read. They're light-hearted, they're sweet, they're trashy, and this one has one of the most interesting takes on a love triangle I have ever seen. Cute first ever contemporary romance, and I'm still reading contemporary romances. For book number 6, I've got Beauty Sleep by Cameron Doeke. This is in the Once Upon a Time set collection. I still haven't worked out what you call it when it's all different types of authors doing thematic series basically. But Cameron Doeke has contributed a lot to this one, and I love all her books. I know earlier I put in The Sisters Grimm as it was my first fairy tale-esque book. This was the first fairy tale-esque book I read when I realised that fairy tales didn't just have to be kids. I mean, it's not old, it's not like mature, and it's probably not even the best I've read, although Cameron Doeke is one of my favourite fairy tale-esque authors. Read them, they're wonderful retellings, this whole set, even the ones that she didn't write, I love. Book number 7 is none other than Twilight. Yeah, I know a lot of people hate this book, and it gets a lot of hate, but I think that's mostly, like me, people who hate the fandom of this book. Like, I actually quite enjoy this book. I'd still read it today. Wasn't that long ago since I last read it. And, you know, I'm not ashamed to admit that despite the fact that I want to slap Bella, and despite the fact that if I ever had a boyfriend like Edward, I'd run for the hills because he's controlling, creepy, stalkerish, overprotective. Like, why would you want that? But I really enjoy this relationship. Sure, it's trash, maybe not the best writing. In the end, it springboarded me into a hell of a lot of paranormal romances, which make up quite a large chunk of my reading nowadays, and I'm not the only one. So, you know, it might not be the best book, but it is a book that started my love for paranormal romance. And so this book, yeah, definitely affected my reading. So book number 8 is Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. This was the book that started my love for dystopian literature. It was technically the second dystopian I ever read. The first one was 1984, and I'm sorry for all you people who loved it, but I just hated it. The society in this book is just so believable, and I can see it actually happening within the next 50 years. Unlike a lot of dystopian novels these days, which, while I still love, seem so far in the future. If you really want to know how wonderful this book is, it survived a signed reading, although I signed it to myself, so I'm not sure if that made a difference. I used it for my HSC exams, which in America I think is like your SATs or your A-levels. I'm not entirely sure how the American school system works, sorry about that. And although I read it, took notes on it and just tore it apart, I still love it, and I still read it today. Book number 9 is Maria V. Snyder's Poison Study. I love this book, I love this series, I love the spin-off series. I basically love anything this woman has written. So not only did this book introduce me to one of my favourite authors, but it also introduced me to sort of the fantasy magic, medieval, kings and queens, all that, which I love. And so, you know, it made a big change to my reading style, to the point where I had to go looking for other books like this one, and only recently have I seen books come out that are quite like this. His Fair Assassin trilogy seems similar, as does the Throne of Glass series. Also, the closest that I can find, despite the fact that the story is completely different, would be Graceling. But yeah, love this. Finally we get to the last book, book number 10. And this book was the book that introduced me to new adult fiction, which has rapidly taken over a lot of my reading this year. And that would be Easy by Tamara Weber. I know a lot of you have probably already read this. This was the first new adult book that I read, and I absolutely loved it. That being said, having read a lot of the new adult fiction now, this one is really a standout, so I picked a great book to start with, and even within the genre, it kind of doesn't quite sit quite so comfortably, but it was a great stepping stone to get there as well. it also introduced me to the idea of giving self-published authors a try, because this book was originally self-published by Tamara Weber, and I was surprised at how good some of the books are that have been self-published, because, you know, it's a common misconception that they're bad because they couldn't get a publisher to publish them. But it was good, and because of that, I've read a hell of a lot more self-published books this year. So that's it, my top 10 books that have changed the way I read. As I said earlier, if you want to give this a go, please give me a link and let me know, because I'd love to see them. Okay, that's it for me today, and I'll see you next time.